Hey Julian, thanks again for coming in and having a chat to us today.
Welcome.
Keen to get into this podcast or meeting or whatever we're calling it.
Yeah, what are we going to call it?
Let's just go with podcast.
Podcast, yeah, right. So I can't ask you what you had for dinner last night?
Okay. So what is a barn and what is the feeling of living in a barn and how can you describe it?
Yeah, okay. Well, I'll start at the beginning. What is a barn? It's how I'm sort of looking at it is a contemporary take on rural design aesthetic. So think of a shed.
Yeah.
Think of what that envisages, what that brings up in terms of, housing and accommodation.
Yeah.
What is a barn for us now? We're reinterpreting it in a sort of contemporary sense. What does it feel like to live in a barn? Well, again, that's part of the layering of the project. You can be really contemporary, you can be quite austere, you can be very traditional. You can bring your grandmother's furniture, live in a modern barn, and it'll look hilarious for anyone coming in, but it'll have, the heartstrings attached to it. So it can be quite a home as much as a utilitarian structure.
Yeah, and another thing I think of when I think of barn is it's pretty feasible to build. It's a simple structure and there's not too much fluff. Like we're basically doing a simple shape. So as a builder you can...
I couldn't agree with you more. It's about keeping the flame alive, keeping it real. So if you overcomplicate the build and want a little jutty-outy bit here and this, that and the other thing, then that's going to cause all sorts of complications, more surface area, weird roofs and things like that.
Yeah.
I mean, it is simple. And, the other thing about the what is barn and what the design is that it's kind of instantly recognisable as a form as house. I mean, you ask a 3-year-old to draw a house and they're going to do the play school. Shape with the gable form and the chimney and a little puff of smoke and the whole bit. I mean, that's instantly recognisable. It's a very strong, powerful building form.
Yeah, and I know for me as a carpenter, that was the first thing I learned to build in TAFE, the dog kennel style thing. But
well, you didn't even need to change your protractor. It's 45 degrees, off you go.
Yeah, it's a simple structure, so yeah. And I think with dressing it up with the right things, a barn is one of the nicest designs these days. And I've seen you've created a lot of them on the block the last 3 or 4 seasons.
Well, the last 3 or 4 seasons, we've very heavily lent into the barn aesthetic for all the reasons we've started to talk about. Instantly recognisable. But the other part of all of that is once you're inside the barn shape, you've adopted that. You have all the versatility in the world to play. Layouts can be free. Bathrooms can be here, there and everywhere, provided, you're looking at the sustainability, issues and bathroom locations and what have you. You're free to make a personal statement inside what's generally considered a generic building form.
So what's your favourite hallmarks of a barn-style house?
Look, I think it just comes down to the knockout silhouette. I think that really does bring the boldness of the form out, and there's a bunch of really clear inclusions you'd have in there, soaring ceilings, for instance, the flexible layout. I think we've always sort of spoken about that, but that's a really key part of it. Mix of materials in both the external and the internal sort of resolution, and any external apertures, whether they're sort of square format or long, tall windows, they're kind of the main features that you'd see to sort of define the barn style.
Expressing them as much as...
Yeah, kind of, and you can see that would generate a series, it's a theme running through any sort of design response.
Yep. The barn is typically a rectangle or an L shape or a C shape, but it's a rectangle.
I'll face it, it's a box.
Yeah, so it's basically the easiest thing to kind of get all those things and tick all those boxes because you've got a simple... orientation, you just spin it. You might have a view to one side, the sun on the other side, but you can still get both, which is...
well, that's exactly right. And look, we're very conscious these days of energy ratings as well. So, the indoor-outdoor used to be easy as a big sliding door. Well, we've got to be conscious of glass in buildings now.
Yeah.
So, what wall components are there? How does that really work? It does require quite a bit of sort of forethought to get there, but it can be a really good result in terms of wellness, and going back to that theme, that indoor-outdoor use of colour, additional functionality with, wellness pods or gyms or, structures of this like, there are quite a number of ways to get there, and it's quite exciting.
Yeah. Okay, so the second theme is flexibility and how a barn-style home can be adapted to suit, I guess, a changing family, because we all know designing a house at some point in someone's life isn't the same as it's going to be in the future with, grandparents, kids growing up, grandkids, all the rest of it. So flexibility is a massive one. So tell us about how barn style house, I guess, works with that.
Yeah, so we touched on it earlier, the idea that it's essentially a box, but we can be quite flexible in terms of the interior layout. So what suits a family day one might not suit a family in a few years' time. What might suit, guests coming to stay in a house, you can lock off a certain part of the house.
Yeah.
It could be an entire secondary dwelling inside the barn form itself. And then, how does that work with elderly or older kids, I should say? Are they going to want their own independent living kind of concept where they can come and go as they choose?
Yeah.
There's a bunch of flexible options with the internal layouts of a barn. And I think reading it into the future, we build a house day one, and then in 5 years' time, our kids are a little bit older. What are their needs going to be?
Yeah.
What are their needs going to be when they're 10? What are their needs going to be when they're 15, 20, 25? I mean, my daughter's only just moved out at 25, so, that was a separate entry and the whole bit. Yeah. The concept that a house can grow in terms of and adapt in terms of its functionality is a really important thing. So multi-generational, of course, that's one concept. Grandparents come to stay. But later on, when the house really needs to be almost 2 or 3 houses, well, a barn can really easily accommodate that with different entry points, closed off areas, whatever it is. And that's a feng shui kind of concept. It's not really spoken about a lot. It's about how a house grows as much as what a house actually is in its physicality. And that's a lot of really interesting opportunities in there if you're working with a barn aesthetic. Something as, again, as crude and as simple, but really powerful in terms of what you can actually achieve in the house in terms of functionality.
Yeah, and I think that was a good point. With having a second dwelling, like a lot of people are struggling to afford to have a house in general. So having a second dwelling that fits off the side of the barn for income, like Airbnb or, just long-term rental, I think that's a massive thing that a lot of people are focused on now, because they need some help paying the rent. And
well, they do, and I think some of the barn aesthetics or barn solutions that we've been working with, the secondary dwelling is actually integrated into the form, so that it's part of the house that you're pre-designed to be able to lock it off.
Yeah.
And then have a separate access point. So it's sort of dignity in design, sort of a strength in terms of the design aesthetic and the response. So there's a bunch in that. It could be as simple as another pod in the back garden. But there are other ways to skin the cat. And the shape, the power of the shape, and what you can do internally gives you that opportunity.
And I think the government has been pushing for legislation to have affordable housing. So these second dwellings are becoming really common. I know for us as a business, we're targeting what's called in New South Wales a CDC, Compliant Development Certificate. We target this second dwelling because you actually get as extra concession on your GFA. So like you've always got your max GFA, which everyone's chasing, but then you can get the second dwelling as an add-on, which not many people know about.
Yeah, it's a clever little thing, isn't it?
It's a little trick to get and sometimes it might not be, or you might not need a second dwelling, but we always chuck it in there for the client to say, you can get this as free concession GFA, and then maybe in the future rent it out or whatever, or maybe just get the approval on it for now and build it whenever.
That's exactly right. You get the approval on it now, you set it all up, and then you may or may not use it. A locked door would give you a secondary dwelling, like in time zero today. That's an additional living space, say for 100%. A growing family, and that's gold. That's gold standard living, and then it can adapt over time. As you say, and you get bonuses. Of course you do. And I think it's a great initiative by the government to be able to do that. And it's up to us to deliver on it.
Well, that's our goal, isn't it? To
absolutely.
Try and get them. So GFA is gross floor space area. So how much square meters you can get in a house. That's what we're all chasing. That's what every client wants. They want to max the block out. All right, so the next one I'd love to talk to you about is resilience. I know for me this is the most important thing as a builder. You need a house that's going to stand the test of time in the Australian climate. Tell us how you design to suit the Australian climate and how resilience is important in your design.
Look, Neil, it is an important discussion to have. Resilience, to me, really talks to the nub and the core of durability is one of the big things. So with a building form like a barn, for instance, you still need to consider shading on the outside of the building, trying to control the heat from the harsh Australian climate. So that might be shade hoods in place of eaves. If we've got a gable form that has a glass end to it, then we might have a deeper eave there, or we might have shade devices.
Yep.
You know, we look at doing a double skin building methodology where we might have two external wall frames.
Yep.
And a deeper roof frame to allow for more bulk insulation, technical terms like thermal breaks in the build, so the outside temperature is not affecting the inside temperature and vice versa. We look at the durability of materials, and that's where James Hardie products can come in and play a major factor. You know, they're resilient to, you know, rot and the whole bit. They're great for thermal breaks in buildings. They're great for acoustics. You know, we've got a whole bunch of aspects in there, and they form part of a bigger picture, you know,
and I feel
the design.
I feel like the barn style homes are typically in fire areas like Bow 40, Bow 29. And
oh, sure. Yeah, well, that's a big thing these days, of course, you know, bushfire ratings and bow ratings. So, yeah, it plays a big part. And, you know, that leads into one of the other tick box items, and that's trying to look at if we're going to go with the double skin technology in a build, you know, we might be using steel frames.
Yeah.
For instance, there, so that, you know, we've got the combustibility concept well and truly covered, both from the frames, like inside the bones of the building, through to the external cladding.
Yeah.
So, you know, you start to sort of layer a bunch of those things together, and, you know, you really are talking about a pretty solid response to resilience and durability in building methodology, let alone design.
And I feel like everything's headed there with all the fires and the climate that we've been, you know, experiencing in the last couple of years, and then all of the changes, you know, Royal Commission and everything with compliance. It's sort of all pointing us to the direction of doing FC as a pretty much a no-brainer.
Yeah, the FC, and look, it's impervious anyway. So you combine that with the steel frame, the FC cladding. I mean, on my way here, I heard a story of a metre of rain in Rockhampton. I mean, they're a prime example of exactly why you need this kind of resilience and this kind of durability in the Australian climate. A metre of rain in Rockhampton and another bushfire alert in Victoria. I mean, we really are a nation of extremes. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a no-brainer for me as a builder to just specify something I know I'm not going back to fix.
Well, so, I mean, I can put my hand on my heart and recommend it to clients.
Yeah.
Because it does work.
Yeah.
Period.
Kind of elaborate more on what you're doing in design, because we all know now we've got a 7-star rating we've got to hit. So it used to be architects designing what is practical and to the budget and what the client wants, but now it's what we have to meet a standard, which is actually quite hard to meet, I know from my perspective. So can you give us a kind of run through of what you're doing on these barn style homes to meet that 7-star?
Yeah, well, I mean, we've all been put through the ringer a little bit. You know, I started my career looking into and adopting and utilising passive solar design techniques in all buildings. So, look, without sort of going on for hours, I mean, that really is orientation of a building. You know, that really is about insulation. That really is about cleverly designing apertures to the building, doors, windows, what have you, so that you're not increasing or decreasing the efficiency of a building. So nowadays, as you say, it's 7 stars, it was 6 stars, all this kind of stuff. Really, if a house is designed correctly, it should be at least 7, maybe 8 stars. And how are we getting there? I mean, we're getting there by utilising great materials, of course, but also integrating double skin walls, as I mentioned earlier. The building wrap products are quite extensive and really, really high performing. We're looking more closely now at thermal mass on the ground for creating thermal environments that are far more effective and efficient. We're looking at a whole bunch of passive concepts, and again, that's orientation and shading and all the usual things, cross ventilation you might expect. But passive is now cutting into active. So we're looking at solar panels on roofs. You know, we're looking at operable external screens. You know, we've got a whole bunch of new tech, and you know, we're using consultants, I'm sure you do as well, to look at how buildings work, how buildings function, and how they're going to do it in the long term, and how they're going to save people money over a long, long period of time. We're talking 100 years, average lifespan for a residential house. We have to do it properly day one.
And I think what you said was bang on with the layering, because I see the cladding to a house as like the jacket, the coat you wear. If you're going to the snow, you've got a jacket. If you're going into a fire, you've got a jacket. You know, it's the protective layer, I see that as, and then having the air breaks and the cavities and the gaps is where you get the real performance.
That's right, yeah, and you've got to have the functionality to work with that too, because at some point during the building's life, and we call it a diurnal cycle, day and night, you got your jacket on at night, but you want to take it off and walk around in a singlet and board shorts during the day. The building has to respond in that way too. So diurnal range of a building, how it's used, is a critical component of analysing passive design. And look, I don't really see it, it's been reported as a bit of a cost impost and a bit of a handbrake on design, but I think good design should respond correctly in the first place, and then you really ought to be able to use it as an opportunity to get to a better outcome.
I think when we have been delving into this with our clients about getting the 7-star rating to comply versus cost, the biggest thing I come back to every time is, do you really need a house that big? Like, you're going so big on the house and you're heating so much volume. If you reduce the house in size a little bit, normally it ticks the box straight away to get it under. So
it's a funny thing, isn't it? I mean, really these days the land costs are so high that clients want to be able to maximise the use of their land. So then I think we were talking about gross floor area before. Why can't I have everything? Well, you can, but let's look at the efficiency of the house. So maybe if we do maximise the floor area, you know, maybe the ceilings have to be lower in the living space to not generate such a high heat load. No, I want high ceilings. Well, okay, then let's jack up the solar panels on the roof so that you're not drawing energy from the grid. Let's look at sort of balancing things out in a sort of pragmatic, sensible way. Let's call that passive, because we're not really relying on any external sort of influence forces or initiatives, whatever you want to call it, tools, to create a passive or create an energy efficient design. Let's look at it from the beginning. And I'm with you. I mean, we don't all need a 6-bedroom home. But I think, as I said, the land prices will generate that response. You know, and okay, if it is going to be a 6-bedroom home, then let's zone it and only use 3 bedrooms and put a door there, and then the teenage kids or someone else can come and rent the other half. So, you know, the heat load can be reduced by clever zoning. You know, that's another component altogether of passive design. I mean, we're really only touching on some of the external issues right now, but there's a bunch of internal things, as you well know. You know, you can do umpteen things internally as well to create and generate and have a successful passive response.
Yeah, things like appliances, and it goes right down to the granular, doesn't it?
Got it, yeah. Your little LED lights, your this, that and the other thing, where the taps come from, you know,
water,
how far do you want to take it? And there's something called the Living Building Challenge, which is about, you know, the energy efficiency of everything in the house, from how far the panels have travelled, you know, where did you get the timber? You know, these tiles, are they from Italy or from Ballarat? You know, how much energy was, you know, used to have that particular piece of material on site? That's another whole challenge. And that's coming. That's an event horizon for us architects. And I think everyone who's responsibly considering the built environment, that's coming.
And I think back to durability, this kind of goes hand in hand, because if you've got something that will last 100 years, you don't have to keep going over again and getting everything driven to site again and again. Like, if it lasts, it's better for the environment. So
tick that box big time. And something like, you know, again, going back to the James Hardie products, once the paint's on, it's going to stay there. So it's really solid, tested, and it's durable. So, you know, knock that one out of the park.
All right, so budget. We all know as an architect this is very important, because you basically get a budget off the client and you need to massage that to get a really good product that looks amazing, but the client's always got a max budget. So working this into a barn-style house is so important. Can you tell us a bit about how you do that?
Yeah, that age-old chestnut of the budget. Yeah, look, we all come up against it. Architects daily come up against it. Really looking at the barn aesthetic and what we've got to play with there, like, it's a pretty simplistic structure. You know, we've covered that a few times already in this little chitty chat. But really, how do we control it? Well, it's about being really sensible with both the client's expectations of a design, what we can achieve. So let's just talk about floor area, making it as efficient as possible, you know, not doubling up on circulation spaces, you know, looking at how rooms might be located so that they're almost modular in a way for a builder to approach it. You know, you've got standard spans for floor structure, you've got standard window openings. You know, these are sort of really common sense things to look at in terms of design. That can go as, you know, simple as, you know, how to do the flooring, but it can also be easily translated to the outside of the build. So if we're looking at cladding, for instance, let's make that as efficient as possible. Let's look at the length of the cladding, the width of the cladding, so that, you know, we're not asking chippies, carpenters on site, to be, you know, leaving little bits of offcuts everywhere. Let's use the panels efficiently. Let's make that modular. Let's use the material, James Hardie cladding, to its best effect. Let's do a datum line around the top of a window. And that's quite a powerful aesthetic response from an architectural perspective, but it's also helpful that could also be the end of a panel length. You know, so really sort of kind of simple things like that are one of the big items. Look at cost-effective landscaping. You know, not everyone needs to have, you know, an award-winning landscape design. I'd like one, of course, but let's just talk about water saving. Let's talk about small plants will grow into big plants. Let's talk about maintenance costs. Let's talk about a whole bunch of other things that can be used to try and alleviate costs through a build. But
I feel like the barn style is such a minimal thing. It's like you said before, the kid drawer, that's just so simple.
yeah, how cool is that?
Yeah, and you don't actually need too much else. You just let the shape be the hero, really simple. And then back to kind of what we spoke about with fire rating, energy efficiency, all of these things with budget, I find you need to find the most cost-effective way to get all of those things ticked off. And a barn style is really easy to do that because you've got a simple form. Like you said, sheet size, if you just did the ceiling heights at 3 metres, the boards wrap around, they fit over the box gutters or whatever it is, and everything just seamlessly works around the building. And I think, barn style is probably one of the easiest from a builder's perspective to hit budget.
Look, it is. And I think the other interesting thing is working with contractors up early too. It's another thing we really haven't spoken about in terms of efficiency, but you know, the architect can design something up in the clouds and you dump a design on someone, they've got no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
So that you start to talk about how it's going to be built and the methodology. These are things that really are becoming more and more commonplace to workshop up front, to make things more efficient, but, you know, cut to the chase, more cost effective. You know, and that's really such an important part of a build these days. Great ideas can just sit on a shelf. That's really got to be able to be implemented and cost effective. Yeah,
and I'm so glad you said that, because from a builder, and I know a lot of people watching this will be builders, that topic is so important for a builder to understand, because a lot of the time they'll see someone like yourself, a pretty big name architect, drawing a picture, and and they'll go, oh, this is going to be hard to build. Like, that's just the way you see. If you've got a name, you've done some cool stuff, a builder looks at it and goes, I might just chuck another 0 on that cladding because that looks like. But normally it's not actually that hard. It's just you've done a bit more work than the average person to set everything out. And then if you can spend the time in the pre-engagement before the construction with the builders, you end up with a heaps better result, and the budget is always massaged together with the client, the builder and the architect.
That's secret, an acronym, what is it? Early contractor engagement.
Yeah,
and you get the job too, eh?
Yeah. Sometimes. So what's your top tips for money saving when designing a barn house?
Look, it's actually really quite simple, and I'll give you 2. Let's talk about internal layouts. Keep it efficient. Keep bathrooms stacked. It's as simple as that. Saves plumbing, saves a whole bunch of angst and cost. The second one would be keep the external finishes consistent. Don't go changing things. Different cladding solutions require different waterproofing solutions. Like, it just gets complicated, messy, it's going to cost you. Keep it simple and keep it easy, and then everyone's going to be happy, especially your bank account.
Yeah, less is more.
Less is more, got it.
Yeah. So one thing I love about the James Hardie cladding is it's pre-primed and ready to paint. So for us to install it, it's super fast. These are stuff from the design perspective that saves time and money for you guys.
Oh, look, it's really as simple as having a tried and true product. Like, it saves time on the installation, sure. The contractors that I've been sort of using are really aware of the product. The standardised sheets, like, it's a dream product in a sense, because you know you're getting 2.7, you know you're getting 3, whatever it is, you know, it makes it really, really easy. And from that point of view, it just sails straight into sort of a cost-effective build. So I think they're from a sort of more construction methodology point of view things, they're the sort of key takeouts. You know, it really is a versatile product in that sense.
And you don't need any other cover-ups like render and all the rest of it that adds time, and it's another layer. You've just got a product that you pick up, screw it on the wall, chuck one more coat of paint on it, and you're done. Yeah,
so it's a tried and true, I call it an inert product. It's ready to go. It's not going to fall off. It's right there, ready to go. And it's done the test of time. One of the key benefits of using it is the simplified installation. Standard sheet sizes make it easy for everyone, and really that's going to end up lowering the labour costs at the end of the day. So, you know, it's a win-win-win.
So I've noticed you've chosen a pretty out there colour. Tell us about what this colour is for your barn.
Why did I choose this colour for the barn? Yeah, totally. Look, it's really a response to the general sort of palette, if you like, of housing designs at the moment. You know, we're looking at a lot of black. You know, we're looking at a lot of sort of a mix match of colours. What I really tried to do was look at what would sit well in the Australian environment that's not a dull olive green or not a dark burnt timber or whatever the hell it is. You know, I wanted to have a different response in there, and I see it, that sort of terracotta, rusty kind of feel, texture, if you like, is a soft response to providing a coloured building. You know, and it works well with the barn aesthetic. It works well with the cladding, because then I can start to accentuate joints and you know, have a bit of an architectural play, if you like. But for me, it was a solid response to looking at like an earthy, warm, ochre is a good word, ochre kind of response to the environment. You know, and I think it will age really well and won't look sort of too tricky or designed. You know, it sounds a bit weird, an architect saying that, but I want it to be a soft approach to a coloured building. Yeah,
and I've got to be honest, looking at it like that, I naturally think it's a bit out there, but then you look at it on a finished render with the accents, the hoods, the shading and the shapes of the modern barn house, and it looks incredible.
Yeah, I think it's fun dealing with colours in buildings. Like, we've gone through a monochromatic kind of style with architecture, and now we're looking at colours. And when you look at colours, like under these lights now in the studio, you know, the terracottas or the sort of rust-coloured paints can look a bit extreme, but you take them outside and put them vertically, the colours change automatically. The colours change from a north-faced elevation to a south-faced elevation to east and west as the sun tracks over a building. Colours change. So I think being able to sort of look at a colour that adapts the way you want it, I'm talking you as me as a designer, wants it, and also how comfortable the owners are in the building. You know, that response is kind of interesting. But yeah, the first time we were putting these colours out on the table, it's like, where are we going with this? Yep. But I think we've sort of found a really comfortable position, and we're quite excited.
Yeah. So lastly, tell us about the barn design handbook and what we can get out of that.
Yeah, look, it's a fabulous opportunity to be able to condense a bunch of knowledge into a sort of concise reference document. I mean, really, what can you get out of it? It's kind of like a toolkit, if you like. If people are interested in exploring the barn concept, well then let's give them some key sort of guiding points, if you like. Let's talk about symmetry, let's talk about the window openings, let's talk about the uniform cladding. You know, these are really sort of key points that you could start to reference. Let's talk about colour. You know, we're demonstrating quite a bold response. It needn't be everyone's cup of tea, invertible cup of tea. But, you know, you could start to look at how a uniform finish will look on a barn. You know, you could start to talk about how even a brighter colour might work on a barn, vivid white, Let's talk about all sorts of different environmental responses. You know, you might want a lighter coloured building in a hotter environment. You might want a warmer coloured building in a cooler environment. These are all part of the passive design things. But, you know, I think in the barn style book, Modern Homes Forecast, you know, there's a bunch of really practical ways to start to look at adopting that and assessing whether it's right for every project or not. I mean, that's an important part of it. But, you know, that's what people can expect to get out of it. It's practical. It's a really good stepping stone.
Yeah, I think that what you said about climate is a massive one, because a lot of my clients that come to me and ask, I want this black house, and they might be in northern New South Wales or Queensland or wherever it is. It's kind of like trying to get the budget, the energy efficiency and everything to work with a black house is a bit harder. You might be better off with a white house or all those sort of things. And sometimes what they want isn't achievable. So having a handbook that kind of spells out all of the, I guess, from go to woe of what you can do with a barn house is so helpful to give that to a client, and then they come to an architect and a builder to talk once they have a little bit better understanding. So they're not just saying, I want this, I saw it on Pinterest, do that. There's a bit more context to it.
Yeah, well, Pinterest is killing us in the design world, isn't it? Far out. Like, I get sort of documents and all Pinterest sort of stuff these days. But
yeah.
Look, you're right. And we've had to sort of educate the greater population a little bit as designers, you know, as to what's achievable. So, yeah, it's critical. It's part of the big picture. And to have that sort of condensed, you know, in a way into the Modern Homes Forecast book under barn style, you know, I think we're on a bit of a winner there with being able to help people.
Yep.
You know, because that's kind of what it's all about at the end of the day.
Yeah, it just makes it more efficient for everyone.
Yeah,
You're not wasting any time. So,
yeah, tick, let's go. You know.
Yeah.
Good work.
Well, thanks so much for having a chat. I'm sure everyone listening would have got so much out of that. We really appreciate your time.
Well, thanks, Neil. It's been great to be here and have a chinwag about all of this. And yeah, let's onward and upwards to better things, I suppose.
Yeah.
So yeah, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers.